I bet the audio will work now. Let me double check on there. Yeah, audio should be coming through now. Okay. All right, so we've got audio going. So let's go ahead and redo everything I said. So hello, good evening. I've got a bunch of people here. Hello, Trunks, Mine, Eighth, Titus, Bassoonist, um, Jared, and yeah. So we should be going. Remember, there's a 30-second delay between what you hear or see and what I say. Yeah, I plugged in the microphone just super late, and for whatever reason, it didn't automatically turn on. Um, so yeah, as you can see down at the bottom of the screen, I do have the link to the Patreon, um, and the big thing that's been going on is we've got the Discord server up and going. I know several of you had asked for access to a Discord, and so it is there. It's only going to be available to Patreon members. We've been having some really cool discussions going on there. Titus is a member on there, and we've been discussing all sorts of things. Just free to ask whatever you want, and if I'm there, I will answer to the best of my ability. One of the cool things we've been talking about this week on the Discord is someone sent me links to a whole new family of brass instruments that they had invented and had built, and it's absolutely fascinating. A whole family of helicons, of all things, which are large bore tubas. And so that's been kind of fascinating discussing that. And I need to get back with the inventor on that. And who knows, maybe we'll have him as a guest on a Band Nerd Hangout, although he's in Slovenia. And so that would be really late. All right. But that's how much minimum per month? $1. That's it. You can go all the way up to $25 a month on the Patreon will get you access to the upcoming courses that we're going to be doing, composition courses, and that will start in the new year. And there's also preview chapters on there and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, $1 a month is as cheap as you can join. That's less than a cup of coffee. A cup of bad coffee, too. But anyway, tonight's discussion is percussion. So, we're going to discuss the drums and whatever. I have my old pair of drumsticks here from when I took percussion class back in college. And if you're not familiar with how typical college education goes, there's what are called method classes. And the method classes are for music education majors where they spend a semester learning percussion, or a semester learning brass, or a semester learning woodwinds or strings. Some larger schools will split those. For instance, I know some schools will do 2 semesters of woodwinds. So one semester will be flute and clarinet, and the other will be oboe, oboe, bassoon, saxophone. Battery. I have batteries in the camera. They're ready to go. I've got another one charging over here. So, yep, we're good on batteries. We will not have battery failure like we had a couple weeks ago, and I also won't go over an hour and a half. But anyway, so percussion. All right, so let's go ahead and just start off with general questions anybody has about percussion. Remember, we covered all the mallet stuff last week. If you have mallet percussion questions, go ahead and you can ask those, but we'll stick mostly to drums, toys, cymbals, gongs, and tam-tams, and all that fun stuff. Oh, and timpani. Can you talk about how to use the snare drum? When I try to write for it, it usually sounds pretty cringy. Okay, let me talk about snare drum and let me go on a diatribe. This might be a topic for a Brett's Hot Takes. I absolutely hate the snare drum. And the fourth movement of Symphony 4, what was originally the Zephyrus Overture, I have uh, basically told myself that is the last time I'm ever going to use the snare drum. I don't like it. I don't think it's a music. It's musical. I think it's a military instrument, and I don't write military music. Therefore, I am just done with writing for snare drum. Um, and I know percussionists will hate that because it's like, that's what they study. But there's so many better drums out there than snare drum. I don't like it. Um, what do I think about indoor percussion? Well, isn't all percussion indoor percussion? I'm not sure what you mean there, Micah. Um, meant the battery percussion. Well, yeah, that's what percussion is. It's you beat it. So yeah. So yeah, not mallet percussion this week. Everything else. The term battery I don't like using. Um, Typically, it goes along well with the salt, um, which also goes along well with a pepper. But yeah, as in Winter Guard, I try not to pay any attention to marching stuff. So yeah, no, I don't care for it. It's not my cup of coffee. And let them do their own thing. But you saw my no, yeah. I'll take a good percussion ensemble any day, but that's just indoor drumline, and I don't like drumline, and I make no bones about that. I don't think it. I don't think on it. I just ignore it and go home. Okay, so where shall we start? I think the place we need to start is the king of all percussion instruments, and we need to start talking timpani, the single most important percussion instrument that you have in the band or the orchestra. The timpani is the co-pilot of the orchestra or the band. You have two conductors essentially in the group. One is up conducting in front, and the other is the timpanist. And both lead the ensemble from their position, one from the front, one from the back. The timpanist is not considered a member of the percussion section. They are their own section. So you'll have a principal timpanist and a principal percussionist. Never ask the timpanist to do something other than timpani. My favorite idiophone. I don't play favorites. I have least favorites, but I don't play favorites. I really never have because it changes every day, which is why I hate security questions like for passwords. What's your favorite color? I don't know, it changes. So yeah, I don't play favorites on pretty much anything. All right, so timpani. Timpani have been part of the orchestra and the band since the Baroque era. And a lot of this is influence from the Turks. In fact, the Turks had a lot of influence on percussion getting put into the orchestra and the band. They are responsible for the timpani. They're responsible for the bass drum, the snare drum, cymbals, um, gongs, tam tams, all all the traditional instruments we associate with orchestra music or band music comes from Turkey, and it's from the Ottoman Empire. Particularly their influence in Austria in the 1700s when a great example of this. If you've ever seen the movie The Adventures of Baron Munchausen from the 1980s, it's a Terry Gilliam film. It's absolutely charming, but it's a lot talking about the Turks on the outside of town and that was real life in the 1700s. The Turks were trying to invade into the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but in so doing, they brought their music in groups called janissaries, and this was heard by the composers of the day. Mozart, the Rondo alla Turca, uh, Beethoven, the Turkish March from the Ninth Symphony. So they're hearing this invading army coming in, but with this cool percussion that they've never had before, like bass drums and cymbals. Those are Turkish instruments. Along with that was the timpani. I think the timpanist can be used very well as occasionally filling in the role of an extra percussionist. You cannot do that in an orchestra. There are actually rules against that. It's very, very rare that you will have that happen in an orchestra. There's a few cases where that happens. The only time I can think of right off the top of my head is Berlioz's Requiem, where he has the timpanist, and there's 10 timpanists, so he has to at this point, all play suspended cymbals. But that's, you can get away with that because they can use the same stick. Otherwise, you do not, in an orchestra setting, you do not have the timpanist play anything else. One of the things is you actually would get into doubling charges. You'd have to then pay them time and a half, and that's musician union rules. So if you ask your timpanist to play anything other than timpani, it's a doubling fee for them. So you have to pay them 1.5 times their going rate. How many timpani can one player play? It depends on how many are in the setup. I have seen sets of 7. So what you would do there is you would have your traditional set of 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then in the gaps between like 1 and 2 and 4 and 5, you could have an extra one. Sets of 4 are standard. Sets of 5 are workable. Particularly in modern stuff, you want to have a 5th timpani. That's the small one. I'm sure they can play as many as they can surround themselves with, though it's not really ideal. There are cases when I have seen maybe even up to 16 by one player. So the thing is, it is a space issue. The biggest drum is a 32-inch head, and then you've got hardware on either side of it. So you're looking at about a 40-inch space here, and then they go down. And it just takes a long time, a lot of space. At my school, we use 5 timpani for our ensembles. Yeah, 5 is pretty common. At one point, the timpanist played the bass drum. That was probably just a makeshift. They were short a percussionist. Out in the professional world, that doesn't happen. An 18-inch timpani would be super small, Micah. The smallest that's commonly available is a 20-inch timpano. By the way, that gets me into a grammatical thing. Timpani is the plural word. A single timpani is called a timpano. So 1 timpano, 2 timpani. That's exactly right. Yeah, since students don't get paid. Yeah, multiple timpani is a space issue as well as a money issue. I'm running into this. I'm doing some work with a local church here for a big Christmas festival, and they need timpani. And they want to do it with as few timpani as possible because that means as little moving as possible. Typically, the church does it with 2. But this year they've got to have 4. And the moment you get to 4, transportation costs go up. Transporting a timpani can be very expensive. If the orchestra or the band doesn't own timpani, you have to then find them, rent them, whatever, and you have what's called cartage. Cartage is where your instrument is so big you actually get paid extra to move the timpani. Woohoo! Thank you, Jared. You're awesome. Oh, you're awesome in many other ways too. No, that's not the Jared special behind me. That's in a different room. I don't know. I don't know where the Jared special clarinet is. Yeah, timpani aren't cheap. They are compared to bassoons. But yeah, good set of timpani are not cheap. And the okay, so let's talk basics of the individual drums. There's a really easy way to remember timpani. Each timpani has a range of a fifth. Give or take some variance depending on the individual drum. And so you might get a sixth, you might even get a seventh, but that'd be really stretching it. On average, though, each timpani has a range of a perfect fifth. And timpanists tune their timpani this way, typically. So, the biggest drum, the 32-inch, is tuned to D2. That's the D right below bass clef. Then the next one up is a 29-inch. That's F2. The next one up is a 26-inch, and that is a B flat 2. The next drum up is the 23-inch, and that's D3. If you have a 20-inch timpano, that's an F3. And what happens is you have D, F, B flat, D, F. You have a B flat major arpeggio in first inversion, starting on the D. And simple from there, so you go up a fifth, so the range of the big one is D to A. The 29 is F to C. The 26 is B flat to F. The 23 is D to A. And then the small piccolo, the 20-inch, is F to C. So super simple that way. Even just changing rooms in the same building is a major operation with timpani. Absolutely is, yeah. Timpani tend to like to stay put. Whenever I write for timpani, I run out of notes. Okay. Well, I'll get to that because timpani scoring can be difficult. Just to make you shiver, my band moved our timpani across town in a pickup truck with myself and others straddling them in the back. Hopefully you had insurance. Okay, so bassoonist, you say you run out of notes. So here is the issue that a lot of beginner composers too run into. The timpani are not a bassline instrument. They are a rhythmic instrument. They are a supporting instrument, but they're not going to play your whole bass line, nor should they. There was a famous YouTube video several years back of a drum corps timpanist who was showing off how virtuosic they were by playing the melody to, or the melody or bass line or something to Verdi's Requiem, the Dies Irae, and all these chromatic runs and stuff on the timpani. And that's not what a timpani is for. The timpani does not function that well. And what happens is, as impressive as it may sound, the notes get blurred together and it just sounds like a wash and a rumble, and it doesn't make any kind of musical sense. Now, if you want a wash and a rumble, then fine. But it doesn't work that way. So, if you're a beginning composer on timpani, I would suggest write for 2 pitches only, tonic and dominant. Sometimes you can do tonic and subdominant. So that would be the 1 and the 5 or the 1 and the 4. And if you do that, so we can go through harmonically. A 1 chord, So let's just say we're in C major. C, E, G is a 1 chord. I can play a C. Boom, boom, boom. Great. 2 chord. D, F, A. I don't have one of those notes I can play, do I? D, F, A. What's the next note up in a 2 chord? Well, it'd be a 2, 7, a C. Oh, well, guess what? Boom, boom, boom. C. I can play that again. 3 chord. We don't play 3 chords. Don't worry about it. 4 chord. That's F, A, C. Well, I've got a C. Dun, dun, dun. So I can play a C on a 1 chord, a 2, 7 chord, and a 4 chord. 5 chord. I now have a my G I can play. So that's the dominant. That's easy. A 6 chord. That's A, C, E. I've got a C I can play. So that C is now getting played for 1, 2, 7, 4, 6. 7 chord. Well, that's B, D, F. Well, you know what? A 7 chord is really just a 5 chord without the root. So I can just turn that into a 5 chord. Okay, so I can do that. So I can use, if I'm just using traditional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I can use 2 drums on everything. Brett will hate this analogy, but it's like how the TR-808 bass drum sound is used pitched and pop today. You won't hear a disco bass line with those sounds. It's just the rhythm, just nice when resonating in key. I've heard tell of something called an 808. I am not sure what an 808 is. We don't play 3. It's true. 3 is a non-functional chord, and we don't use it. 3 is essentially just a 1 chord without the C in it, without the root in it. I think drum corps should not be considered as being in the same type of music as something like an orchestra. In many of the old shows from the 70s, the musicality is mostly non-existent. Yeah, we're not going to talk drum corps. It's not pertinent to what we do. One wacky idea for an instrument I have was a drum that had a really long body with giant keys that could be closed to change the resonant length, therefore changing the pitch. Not sure if it would work. It would not work, no. The pitch of the drum is not determined by the resonating body. It's determined by the tension on the head. So, yeah, you could put as long of a resonating body on it as you want, but it's not really going to be effective. 3, 4, 2, 5, 1. Yeah, you could use it that way, but that 3 is still functioning as a 1 chord. Should we use the 3 chord? You can, but it's just going to function as something else. Wait, is 6? Yeah. Well, 6 is VI, yeah. 1, 4, 7, 3. Well, that's 7 to 3. That's really just 7 to 1. So, yeah, so 3 is just a funky 1 with half a step difference. It's all it is. Is it 3 the 5 of 6? No. It is not. The 5 of... So if we're in C major, the 5 of 6 would be E, G sharp, B. And that functions differently than E, G natural, B. The resonant body... Well, okay, so the resonator affects the resonance. It doesn't affect the pitch. The pitch is still affected by the head of the drum. Yeah, sweeter. That's right. 3 is just a version of the tonic chord. So, yeah, 3 is not it really fully functional. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't do anything. It really most of the time just functions as a tonic. If you are using the 3, it most likely means that you're moving to minor. And that's basically how it is. Now, 3 within the minor does function a little bit differently than it does in the major. But that's a little different story. Okay, so on back to timpani writing. So I laid out what you could do with just 2 timpani. Now, the next thing you would do is add a 3rd timpani, and that 3rd timpani would go to the subdominant. So that would be F. Well, now I can put that F on a 2 chord, I can put it on a 4 chord, and that frees me up a lot. So I can have the C for 1, 2, 7, 4, 6. I can have the F for 4. I can have it for 2. I can have it for 7 now. I can use a full 7 without the G. And I can have the G, I can have that on my 5 chord. That is different. The group drum that you can change the pitch of. Yeah, that's a marimba. What you're changing there is the the vibrating air column, not the there's no head on it. What's resonating is the air column itself, not the drum head. Do I ever use 6/9 chords? I'm going to assume when you say that you are referring to an add 6 chord with a 9th on it. I use add 6 chords all the time. I don't typically add the 9th though. I mean, I have an add 6 chord, or I'll have a 9th chord. 9th chords I'll use all the time in my much more chromatic writing. Even 11th and occasionally 13th chords. A lot of that stuff, though, is much more jazz harmony inspired. And one of these days, I need to sit down and actually take a full jazz harmony course. Because jazz harmony notation is just really different than the Western harmonic tradition. All right, so we've got, so if we've got 3 drums, you want tonic, dominant, subdominant. Typically, you would want to do that as, so say we're in C, you want C3, right as your middle drum, so that's the C in the bass clef. Then you want the G below that, so G2, and then above that, you want F3. So a perfect 4th, then a perfect 4th. Okay, yeah, the sorts of chords you could use in modern music, yeah, so it's definitely a jazz chord. Now that we're talking harmony, can timpani play harmonies with itself? So, can you have harmony in the timpani? Yes. It is not as effective as you think. Berlioz is kind of the king of timpani harmony, and he starts this in where is it? Where? Well, it's right here, a foot from me. Symphonie Fantastique. So in the 4th movement of Symphonie Fantastique, he has 4 drummers, and oh, that's the 5th movement. No, I'm sorry, not 4th movement. 3rd movement. So the scene in the countryside. And so timpani 1 is playing an F. Timpani 2 is playing a B flat. Timpani 3 is playing a C, and timpani 4 is playing an A flat. And so he's doing all sorts of timbres and chords with those 4 notes. And what he's doing there, though, is creating thunder. And that's kind of what happens when you have 2 timpani going together. You start getting a thunder effect. Berlioz, of course, would completely up this in the Requiem, the Grand Mas du Monde. And in the Berlioz Requiem, he basically sets the record for number of timpani and timpanist because he wants 16 timpani played by 10 drummers. And they are all going to be rolling at once, basically. And it is these giant, massive chords. And it sounds like thunder. And he only does this effect in the tuba mirum. And I've heard it live before, and it's just this wall of thunder hitting you from this massive timpani section that stretches across the entire back wall of the orchestra. Where should a person who has almost no idea of how to compose start with an end goal of writing for orchestra? Cool, I'm going to be starting a course on that in January. And it's going to be part of the Patreon program. And it's going to be basically you sign up at the $25 level, and we're going to just start at basics, starting to compose for each instrument. So we'll start with flute and then go to oboe and then so on and so on. And you do that, you build up writing for each instrument. By the end, if you can handle each instrument individually, you can then start writing for orchestra. Sonatas are like, you start writing with you start writing for small groups. Do not start writing for big groups. I made that mistake. In high school, I made the mistake of trying to start writing for orchestra. The good thing is I had some theory background. I had pretty extensive performance background at that point. The bad thing is I had no idea what I was doing still. And so I would mess around a lot, and I thought I was writing great music, and I wasn't. One of these days I'll go back and find the old stuff. Maybe I'll do a watch party where I listen to Brett's old compositions from high school if I can find them. My God, would that be horrendous? But yeah. So, you start writing small. Okay. So anyway, timpani. By and large, throughout up until the early 1900s, the timpani pretty much stayed on the pitches that they started on. You could do a little bit of adjusting throughout the course of a piece, but once you had your drums tuned, they stayed where they were. Because tuning them was a bitch. You would have to go and tighten each lug on them. And there were ways to do it. Someone developed a hand crank that would tighten all the lugs at once. But finally, somebody came up with the pedal, and which is what we see on all modern timpani today, is that you can just push the pedal up and down, and it changes the pitch. It changes the tension on the head. And with that, we could do a lot more. And Bela Bartok was really the first person to take advantage of the pedal on the timpani. So if we go look at his writing, particularly in the music for strings, percussion, and celesta, and the concerto for orchestra, he's pushing the limit of what the timpani can do. And really, he still is on the cutting edge today. I want to go to college for music composition, but they want you to submit 3 pieces. But I'm in my senior year, and I don't have more than one really bad jazz band chart. Cool. That's something that it's very difficult for me to answer to comment on that without knowing the full situation there. And plus, college applications are due very soon, so it would be something easier to answer off the stream. So think about that if you want to, get a more in-depth answer to that. Alternatively, the best composers are those that study performance. Honestly, you'll get more out of studying performance than you will out of studying composition. Um, oh, where was I? Okay, so the pedal. So yeah, with the advent of the pedal, we could change pitches really quickly, and techniques like a glissando became available. So you could glissando about a fifth from the lowest note to the highest note. One thing to think about in timpani too is the lowest note of each drum. So the low D, the F, the B flat, and the D um, don't sound good. They're wobbly. They're flabby. The If you can avoid writing those particular notes, do so. Um, the only way you can really get away with writing the very lowest pitch of each drum is to do it at piano or pianissimo. Um, and there are some ways around it, but in a loud dynamic, say the low D on the 32 inch, at forte, it's really going to be flabby and almost start sounding like a bass drum. And so you're not going to get a lot of pitch out of that. Interestingly, drums larger than the 32 have been made, but they're not commonly available. This would be something really interesting to pursue, basically a 36-inch drum or a 35-inch drum. There are examples of people wanting to go all the way down to the B flat below the bass clef. I believe there is a B flat in Howard Shore's score to Lord of the Rings. But when they did that, they got a custom 36-inch timpano to do that particular note. Can you hold the pedal while the drum is still resonating? Well, yeah, you can hold the pedal. I mean, that's what it's there for. So you can hit the drum, boom, with a foot on the pedal, and then boom, push the pedal down and glissando the pedal up. That's that's a timpani glissando right there, and that's a technique that's been in use since Bartok. I could pull off the score to music for strings, percussion, and celesta, and you'll find that technique in there. So no, it's not going to hurt the drum at all. That's what the drum is made to do. Yeah, so timpani writing can be quite difficult, and for a lot of these reasons, this is why we don't have the timpanist play other instruments. If you want the B flat one, you could just use a tuba instead. Well, the tuba doesn't sound anything like a timpani. I mean, yeah, it's there. I would be actually more tempted down there to use a piano. The piano will sound more timpani-like down in its low range than any kind of wind instrument, because the wind instruments have infinite sustain. The piano becomes much more drum-like. You do a rolled glissando across multiple timpani where you switch drums partway through a larger range. Yes, but there will be an audible break when the player moves from one drum to another. Now, a bass player can do that almost imperceptibly, but it does. There will be some break there. So we should also probably talk about the piccolo timpano, which is the 20-inch. This is something that got really popularized by Stravinsky. Stravinsky called for a piccolo timpano in The Rite of Spring because he wanted a high B flat. And on the 23-inch, the highest note is an A. And so to get the B flat, the piccolo is used, the 20-inch, which will go up comfortably to a C. In fact, Theo, I'm just about to answer that question momentarily. So yeah, the 20-inch is pretty common. I've seen several high schools with 20 inches, so it's not unheard of to get one. Smaller drums are rarer. Surprisingly, one of the ones that gets used is an Orff instrument. If you don't know what Orff instruments, if you went to elementary school and you played like the xylophones or the metallophones, those are Orff instruments. And they've made some Orff timpani. And they're pretty small. And some professional percussionists, professional timpanists, have taken those and used them as extra piccolo timpani. So they'd be even smaller. So you got your 20 inch, and they take an Orff 18 inch and an Orff 16 inch, and to effectively get even smaller. And if we follow the same pattern, it might be a B flat and a D. So B flat 3 and a D4. And that would get us well into the treble range. But there is another instrument out there that can effectively become high-pitched timpani. And those are rototoms. Rototoms were invented in the 1960s by the late composer Michael Colgrass. Michael Colgrass, if you don't know, for wind band, he's most famous for the Winds of Nagual. And I finally got to pronounce it. He does pronounce it Nagual. Yes. So yeah, what are Orff instruments? Orff composed Fortuna, well, Carmina Burana, and he developed a whole bunch of school instruments. So he helped popularize the use of recorders in schools, but also if you ever played, the xylophones or metallophones or drums in elementary school, that was based on the teaching of Carl Orff. Okay, so yeah, let's get back to rototoms. Rototoms are interesting, and most percussionists absolutely hate them. They were really kitschy, and they were used pretty extensively in like the late 70s and early 80s, and then everybody stopped using them. But there are some interesting and effective ways that you can use them. So rototoms may have close to a 3-octave range. I've seen written parts down to like E2. That's the E right below the bass clef, and then they'll go well into the treble clef. There is one piece orchestral piece that I can point to that was really, really effective in the use of rototoms, and that's Michael Tippett's final orchestral work, The Rose Lake. It was written about 98, I think. And it uses like 3 rototom players, each with a fully chromatic set. So they've taken these drums and turned them into essentially mallet percussion. And it's, this great chromatic drum sound, and it's really highly effective. In fact, I used that technique in the Storm section of Symphony 3. So if you listen in there, if you go back to the recording, there is a section of, I used 13 full octave of chromatic rototoms from C3 to C4. So the octave starting at middle C. And so, yeah, you need a total of 13 drums. But again, rototoms are easy to get a hold of. The problem with rototoms, of course, would be setting them up. And I think London Symphony, when they recently did Tippett's The Rose Lake, they had like a 3-hour setup on their rototoms. But that was 38 rototoms they used for one piece. That is a lot of rototom. But, they were invented as kind of it's chromatic. Saying Symphony 4 is done. I've shipped it off to a couple people already. I've got a tentative premiere next December, a year from now. I'm just kind of working on the details on that. I am in part preparation now. I have all the parts complete on it except the horns and trumpets. So other than that, Symphony 4 is done. But yeah, so I started doing the part engraving on Sunday, and as of today, Thursday evening, I still have 7 parts to go. I think when all is said and done, I will have. It'll be close to 180 individual files of parts. It's probably going to be like 300 pages of parts when all printed out. So yeah, that's a lot. Okay, let's see. Should we keep going on timpani? Okay, so somebody asked about timpani mallets. So timpani mallets, we'll use my snare drum sticks here, are typically about the thickness of the snare drum. And then they're going to have a wooden head that's typically covered in felt. However, the felt is a later addition. Originally, the timpani mallet's head was wood. Or ivory. Of course, we don't use ivory anymore because it means killing elephants. So, up until every piece of music written before Symphonie Fantastique would have been written for wooden or ivory drumsticks. This includes all of the Beethoven works, all Mozart, Handel. They're all wooden drumsticks. Then Berlioz got the idea because Berlioz barely got through the Paris Conservatory because he really didn't play anything, so they just stuck him in the percussion section. You're going to play bass drum because you can't play anything else. That's how Berlioz do. But so he got the idea, what if I take these timpani sticks and I cover them with sponge? And then he did that, went to the timpani. Oh, look at this, a nice soft roll. And lo and behold, by doing that, Berlioz changed how we play timpani. It went from this very hard percussive to all of a sudden we now have soft timpani mallets. Eventually the sponge got replaced because it was pretty brittle and it went to felt, much softer. Though some people, for authentic performances of Berlioz, will still use a sponge mallet. I've noticed that it's possible to make a circular hand drum, make a consistent note by lightly touching the side of my hand along the radius. Have you seen someone do something similar before? I mean, basically what you're doing is similar techniques to like African talking drums, or even a lot of the Latin percussion. There's a technique you'll see with conga players where they'll take their elbow, press it into the head of the conga, and it change the pitch of the drum. African talking drums do the same thing. You basically, there's string around it. You can press the string and when you're hitting it with the mallet. The best place to go here, African talking drums, go see the movie Black Panther. Ludwig Göransson, I think is his name, the composer that also is the composer on The Mandalorian, used African talking drums throughout it. Could a composer ask for a timpanist to play on wood mallets, or would there be any use? Absolutely. Composers ask for wood mallets all the time. So the classic example of using wooden mallets is Mars from the Planets. So if you go listen to Mars, that what you're hearing in that rhythm is the Colenio strings. What Colenio means that instead of bowing it, they're hitting with the wood of the bow, and wooden mallets on the timpani. I know you said you used rototoms in your third symphony, but what other percussion instruments did you use? Braden, I would have to look. I honestly couldn't tell you. I know it's like marimba, vibraphone, crotales, Glock, bass drum, tam-tams, cymbals, suspended cymbals. That might be it. I've seen snare drum players place one stick on the edge of the drum and move it to change the pitch. Yeah, you can do certain things like that. So you take the do that. A lot of times you can also do that by hitting. There are all sorts of techniques you can do. Um, back with timpani, there are a couple of effects that are really cool. One thing you can do, take a suspended cymbal, turn it upside down so that the bell of the cymbal is resting on the timpani. Now it's going to be wobbly, but what you do is you do a roll on the upside down cymbal that's placed on the timpani drum head. And when you do that, you then can adjust the pedal up and down. And what you're going to hear is the suspended cymbal roll and then the resonance of the timpani. And you get this, it sounds like it's underwater. Really cool effect. Something else you can do is you can take a crotale and you put it on the rim of the timpani, and then you bow the crotale, and you get the sound of the bowed crotale, but you also get the resonance of the drum and whatever the drum is tuned to. Of course, you can change it. There are a lot of percussion instruments. Are we going to be able to do this in one stream? Probably not. So, well, Titus, we talked about chimes last week. Last week was all mallet percussion. So we might just turn this one into just timpani today because timpani is a subject unto itself. And I was thinking about that. So let's just say this was just timpani this week, and next week we'll do the rest of the drums. Basically, like snare drum, tenor drum, bass drum, all that fun stuff. Okay, sound cool? Cool. I'm in charge. I get to make the rules. Okay. Something else we have not talked about is the use of multiple timpanists, multiple sets of timpani. We have several classic examples of this in the literature. The best example is, of course, the planets, where we've got two timpanists. Each one is supposed to have 3 drums, so a total of 6 drums on stage. But in practice, both players will have 4. Although I think one of them can do it with 3, and then the other with 4. But so you'd end up with 2 sets of timpani, and that is a really cool. And what they can do then is they've now got, instead of, we talked about using just 2 notes earlier, then expanding to 3 notes. Now we've got 6. We got a lot more possibilities we can choose from. This is really effective for a piece like the Planets that is bitonal throughout most of it, meaning it's in 2 keys at once. A lot of times it'll be in B flat and E at the same time. Go look at Mercury. And so each timpanist could be playing in a different key. That works quite well. Something else, another great piece to look at is Carl Nielsen's 4th Symphony, The Inextinguishable. There is a timpani battle in there. What he does is the only percussion he has in the piece are 2 sets of timpani. One placed over here, one placed over here. And in the middle of it, the 2 timpanists just go on this wild battle with each other. Can you use 2 timpanists with 6 drums each for a whole chromatic scale? Theoretically, yes. At some point, though, I mean, the more you do that, the less you're treating the timpani like they traditionally have been. Berlioz with like 27 timpanists on every song. Berlioz did that exactly once. And it was for one movement of one piece where he used 16 drums. Is there much extended timpani technique? Well, I mean, the couple things that I mentioned, the upside down suspended cymbal roll, the bowed crotale on there, and something simple like that is using cloth covered timpani practical. Oh yeah, so you would write that as muted or coperti. So a muted timpani is where you place a cloth over part of the head and it just dampens it. Mahler will use this occasionally. Um, the opening of uh, Karel Husa's Music for Prague 1968 is muted timpani. Boom, 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 boom. So that works quite well. You also can do the one place you almost never hit a timpani is the dead center. It doesn't produce the same pitch, but you can do that. You can ask the timpanist to hit in the center, and it will produce a different sound. That would be more like something along those lines. I've heard of putting a tambourine on a timpano. Yeah, that works. Something else. Leonard Bernstein did this in Profanation. It's one of the movements of one of his symphonies, and I can't remember which one. But basically, he asked for the timpanist, instead of using timpani sticks, use maracas. So you get two maracas and use those as your timpani mallets. So you get not only timpani, but you get maraca sound at the same time. Whether it's effective or not, who knows? Another thing that is seen is the tradition in Elgar's Enigma Symphony, Enigma Variations, excuse me. There is a motorboat section where he's doing a variation on one of his friends who owns and is in love with a motorboat. That's kind of his passion. And in order to create the sound of the engine, what the timpanist does is they take two coins, and it's a specific kind of coin, and I can't remember what it was. I think it may have been shillings. And they would take those and right on the edge of the drum, and instead of doing the pattern as written, they do it with the coins on the drums. There is a few enterprising percussionists and percussion instrument makers have made drumsticks with the coins actually built into them, so you don't actually have to use your fingers. You've got the drumsticks with them, but you just use the coins. And there's a specific reason for using those coins, and I think it has to do with serrated edges. So you know how some coins have serrated edges and some don't. Let's see. So, massive timpani sections. We've talked a little bit about Berlioz. Berlioz is using... So, if you go to the Requiem, it's just all the timpanists are together. Mahler in Symphony 2 has two timpanists on stage, and then there's a third timpanist actually off stage somewhere off out in the hall. So that one actually has three timpanists on it. Of course, the granddaddy, the most timpanist you will have is Havergal Brian's Gothic Symphony, which is a fascinating work that I've been studying the Gothic Symphony for a little over 20 years now, and it still baffles me. I think I understand it, but I'm not sure. But anyway, there's two timpanists in the orchestra, each with like 4 drums. And then outside of the orchestra, there are 4 brass bands with 8 brass players each. And each one of those has a timpanist. So in total, there are 6 sets of timpani going in this piece. And there is a point in the final movement where it is just timpanist, 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 timpanist. There's surround sound throughout the whole concert hall, and it is just this massive thunder. And it's not like Berlioz. Berlioz is just doing rolls and chords. He's not doing these complex rhythms. The Brian passage is, I mean, just these massively complex rhythms, and it is literally meant to be the sound of hell opening up. And I think it's quite effective. Lots of timpani. if we're going to talk about band stuff, I actually don't know too much in the way of band music where you have multiple timpanists. Um, does anybody in the room know any band music where you've got um, two sets of timpani going? Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything. Trying to think, have I even done anything with two sets of timpani? I've done one piece, but that's not for band. No, I can't think of anything. I don't think I used two sets of timpani in either of the big symphonies. Uh, yeah. So I don't know any band music that has two sets of timpani going. Yeah, no idea on that. It's a, and I'm not sure why because I could see somebody like John Mackey being all over that. But in the same vein, most people are going to be writing for a high school level. I mean, what high school is going to own two sets of timpani? Um, your really big high schools will. I've been to some high schools that have three sets, and they'll have like a marching field set, a concert set, and a practice set. Um, Seems a bit overkill. Even though timpani are concert pitch, they seem to have an overtone that kind of makes them sound like they're an octave lower. Yes. Oh, excellent point, helicopter. This is something I am writing about in the chapter I'm working on for Volume 5 of um, band orchestration. So, timpani have this psychological effect that basically they're going to be the lowest sounding instrument, regardless of if they're actually the lowest pitched instrument. So there's a case where I'm analyzing a chord and I'm just doing something simple out of Handel's music for the Royal Fireworks. And the timpani are actually, it's a chord where the timpani are actually playing the seventh. So it's an E7 chord. So E, G sharp, B, D. And the timpani is playing a D. Well, if you look at how the voicing is, the G sharp is in the bass, so I'm putting it in first inversion. But the timpani is playing that D, so it gives it the effect that it's actually in third inversion with the D in the bass. So you can analyze that chord both ways depending on how you perceive the timpani. Yeah. Five what? I you had to ask a forward question to that, Sans. Remember, there's a long delay. Yeah, so the timpani will act as whatever the lowest voice is. So you do have to be careful with that sometimes. Let's see. Trying to think. Um, Simpler timpani parts in general work better. When I was creating the timpani part for Symphony 4, I was looking over and said, yeah, this looks about right. They're not playing all the time. There's not, it doesn't look like a melodic part. If you have a timpani part that looks melodic, chances are it's probably poorly written. I've heard timpani in unison with Pitt's bass, and it did put into perspective it was the upper medium range for bass. Yeah, exactly. Timpani plus pizzicato bass works beautifully. Timpani plus piano is another really highly effective um, uh, uh, technique. David Maslanka would use timpani and piano together a lot. In fact, Gustav Mahler used timpani and piano once. At the end of Symphony Number 8, there's a passage where the timpani are playing this E flat, B flat, A flat, E flat, B flat, A flat, double sticking each drum, and couple that, he's got the piano going dum, bum, bum. And so really, really effective. And the piano at that point um, becomes a timpani. Is that even true with other really low instruments? No, it's only true with the timpani. The timpani just become the de facto bass because of the resonance and their psychological effect. No other instrument will do that. What about the high rang timpani? As almost like a counter melody. Again, if you're writing a melody in the timpani, you're writing for timpani wrong. That's just it's if you that kind of stuff is not what timpani is designed for. What didn't Mahler do in number eight? Surprisingly, the hot controversial take. Mahler 8 may be his most conservative symphony. It is his largest, but it at the same time might be his most conservative. It's a study in counterpoint is all it is. It would not be out of place. Some of the stuff he writes would not be out of place for Bach. And the only reason he's using such a big ensemble is because he has such a big choir. He's got to balance it out. His actual instrumentation, okay, yeah, if you look at your woodwinds, okay, woodwinds and fives, okay, but there's no auxiliaries other than your piccolo, your English horn, your bass clarinet, your contrabass. He's not using any exotic clarinets. He's not using any exotic oboes. He doesn't use any exotic brass. So there's no exotic percussion other than some bells. So in many ways, I find Mahler 8 to be perhaps his most conservative. It's definitely the least personal of his nine completed. It's also the grandest, and so take that for what you will. I think I would find it challenging to write timpani that isn't doubled by something else in that way. Well, I mean, timpani being doubled is pretty common. I mean, timpani, your timpani part should follow the outline of the bass line, but it should not be the entire bass line. I'm trying to think who. I mean, go look at Mahler timpani parts or Richard Strauss timpani parts. Those guys do what they're doing. If you want to go a little bit more extreme, go to Bela Bartok's timpani parts. Bartok is a special case because he's writing for him quite differently. Um, yeah. But yeah, I do not like seeing timpani as melodic instruments. There are some exceptions to that. So a classic example is the opening of the scherzo, Beethoven's Ninth. Ba-ba-dum, beep-ba-dum, dee-ka-dum. In the timpani, bum-ba-dum. And all it is D-D-D, A-A-A, F-F-F, D-D-D. And the F-F-F is timpani taking over the melody, but it's two notes pitched an octave apart. By the way, that's the first time timpani had ever been pitched in octaves. And Beethoven was really stretching it because they only had two sizes of drum at that day. One was an F drum, the other was a C drum. And so the lowest note was F, the highest note was F. What do I think of the timpani part in Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra? Oh, I really need to go back and listen to more Britten. For whatever reason, Benjamin Britten is kind of this hole in my musical knowledge. I mean, I've listened to Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra several times. I mean, I love how it's used in was it Moonrise Kingdom, the Wes Anderson film, but I cannot remember the timpani part. I'm sorry. I know it's there and I know it's important. Here is a somewhat melodic timpani part that you can look at. Look at Hindemith's the scherzo, the turned up scherzo from Symphonic Metamorphosis on themes of Carl Maria von Weber. I love that title because it is so pretentious. But yeah, basically he's got the melody dong go go gong gong, and he's got that in four jump bum 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 bum, and it works surprisingly well. But it's limited to four notes. You don't have to change too much. All right. We'll take a few more questions. And Mercury uses the timpani melodically. Yes, but okay. So let me get that out. Okay, you have to remember that when you're looking at the planets, you are looking at much more advanced orchestration. So I'm going to I'm in Mercury now, and so with Mercury with Holst, you do have to remember. Okay, so you say he uses the timpani melodically in the section, but here's the deal. Here, Holst is only using one of the timpanists on two drums. He only has the pitches B natural and C natural available to him in this movement. Let's see if he does any pitch changes. So roll on C. Okay, that's simple, right? And then, so cool. What you're calling the a melodic passage is not melodic. It is rhythmic entirely. It just happens to be on a specific pitch. Dum bum 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 bum. And I know I butchered that. But that is not what you would call a melodic passage. That's purely rhythmic. It just happens to be the only thing going. It's melodic in the fact that it can play pitches, but a true melody isn't really going to happen in traditional writing. Now there are timpanists who can do it. There's the difference between can and should. A good timpanist will practice chorales on their timpani. Would the next stream be about unpitched percussion? Yes, it would, Helicopter. Unless I get my friend Michael to join us about guitars. We'll see about that. And then I know we'll do one on keyboards. We might do one on electronics. We should probably do one on bass and cello. And I have something big planned for in the new year, if I can get it done. In fact, I'll go ahead and talk about kind of what my big plan for the channel for in the new year is. And this is one of the reasons I am asking for more support over on Patreon, because what I am planning will take a lot more support. What I'm going to be doing is what will kind of be like a TV show, an actual show that will appear on the YouTube channel. And what I am planning is I have a whole season of the show sketched out that I'm going to actually need to start scripting, where we go and talk band history. And the first season is going to be band history up until about 1900. So if one episode per month would come out. Let me go ahead and read off the title. So I'm not going to see it's someone like bar chimes. You're not going to get a bar chime or timpani concerto until someone decides to go over the top with it. Well, I mean, Um, there have been timpani concertos. There's actually a timpani concerto from the Baroque era, if you can imagine that. So timpani concerti do exist. All right, I might Sans. Um, okay, so this is the 12 episodes that I have planned for the History of the Wind Band TV show, YouTube show. Episode 1, what is a wind band? Talk about everything that makes up a wind band. Episode 2, medieval and Renaissance bands. Episode 3, Baroque bands and music for the royal fireworks. Episode 4 is harmony music part 1, where we talk about the beginnings of harmony music and the works of Mozart. Episode 5 is harmony music part 2, Beethoven and Mendelssohn and the later harmony music. Episode 6 is called The Grand Symphony, where we talk about Berlioz's Symphonie Funèbre et Triomphale. Episode 7 is Wieprecht versus Sax, and we talk about the developments and rivalry between Wilhelm Wieprecht and Adolf Sax. Episode 8 is Ponchielli and the Italians. Episode 9 is Rimsky-Korsakov and the Russians. Episode 10, Wagner, Bruckner, and Dvorak. Episode 11 is all about Richard Strauss. And then episode 12 is Patrick Gilmore and the Americans. And that will take us to about 1900, although I know Strauss will go well into the 1900s. But I'm going to be working on scripting those, and that is an entire year's worth. So one of those per month, and I'm going to be looking at filming those. And again, I will need support on that. I will be asking for help on the Discord channel for that. I'll be running scripts through there. So if you want to help out with some of the scripting, I may even be asking for editing help, because that is something I'm not great at, the editing. But that's the plan for next year. So there, we keep doing the live hangouts, but I want to do much more well produced content, and that would get us into the 1900s. So then there'd be a season 2 after that. And one of the reasons I want to do that is because wind band history is so neglected, and we forget how important and how influential the wind band is to music history. And one of the things I've discovered is that the very first piece of music that has instruments assigned to it is a piece for winds. So the wind band, we can definitively say, is older than the orchestra. That we forget as a failing on music historians. But anyway, so there will not be a Thursday hangout next week. Would you guys next week prefer Wednesday or Friday, or would you want to skip next week? Because next week is Thanksgiving. It's the turkey day, and I'm going to be full of turkey and cranberry sauce. So I'll whatever you guys want, I can acquiesce either Wednesday or Friday next week, or we just skip. Up to you, but I enjoy doing these. I enjoy hanging out with y'all. So, if everybody's out of town next week, we need to skip. So, prefer Friday. Wednesday works for me. Okay, those cancel each other out. Yeah, we'll see. I'll be traveling on Wednesday. Let's do Friday instead. Friday is best. Looks like people like Friday better. So I think we'll try and aim for Friday next week. Jared, there should be a link on the Patreon. If there is not a link on the Patreon, message me directly and I will get that to you. Friday. I hate Black Friday as much as you hate marching bands. Black Friday is a great day to stay indoors. That's the day my family traditionally gets the holiday decorations down from the attic. Last year, my dad tore his shoulder out of socket, so we don't want a repeat of that. So yeah, we'll aim for Friday for Black Friday. Maybe I'll wear all black. Who knows? Okay. So, yeah, I think we'll aim for Friday next week. And Jared, if you don't find the Discord server link, just message me. I will double check on the Patreon page. And again, if anybody else wants to join the Patreon page, it'll get you access to the Discord server. And love to have more people there just chatting away about weird, cool instrument esoterica. So, anyway, we're going to go an hour, 20 minutes, and my voice is just about done, and my coffee is just about cold. Awesome, it's still there. I thought I made it a permanent link, so that's good. All right, guys, I'll see you next Friday, unless the girlfriend wants to do something next Friday, and then I'm obliged to do it. So that's, but you know, maybe the discussion will be on Mark Mellits for Black Friday. Boy, that's a nerdy joke, and only bass clarinet players will get that one. Yeah, maybe we can talk about my one of my early pieces for band, Black Mass, which I never talk about. All right, guys. But anyway, yeah, I'll see you guys next Friday.